Rushmore! Rushmore Show! Rushmore Show! Yeah! Welcome to the Rushmore Show, where it's all about your top four and nothing more. Hey, man, it is a great time to start talking about my favorite pastime, baseball. So it's April. We're going to do Around the Horn April, and all month we're bringing baseball to you with 4 really amazing episodes. Andy, what do you think about that?
It's going to be fun. Last month, Music March was kind of my wheelhouse. This is a little bit outside of it, although I do enjoy baseball. But it's going to be a lot of fun. I love talking sports. I love the Rushmore Show and just this whole time hanging out together and stuff like that. So it's going to be a fantastic month. We even worked in some things this month about movies and uniforms, and you'll get all of that later. So it'll help me out to feel a little bit more knowledgeable about the topic.
Well, I mean, you drug me into Music March, so I'm now dragging you around the horn in April. So
we can do it.
Hey, man, look, so our first episode, we are going to jump into some really cool stuff. We're going to talk about our favorite franchises, our favorite teams, if you will. And we have brought on a special guest to help us do that. One of our good friends, Chris Edwards. So, Chris, man, welcome to the show.
Hey, man, how's it going? Nice to finally get on with you guys.
Yeah, man, Chris, thanks for following us and hanging out, man. You've been one of the guys kind of leading us in the comments and things. And man, Chris, we've been friends, I think, for almost maybe 25 to 30 years.
25 years, something like that.
Yeah, I think we met back in the high school times around the old Middlebrook in the circle. So, back in those days, that was fun times. But look, Chris, we brought you on because 1, you're one of our good friends, but 2, you really like the game of baseball too, don't you?
Yeah, I prefer it live to televised, but I do like the only atmosphere I think that's better than live baseball is live wrestling.
Oh man, dude, I can dig that. I mean, if you guys haven't seen, we already talked a little bit about wrestling a few weeks back, and so we are all pretty much wrestling fans, sports fans as it is, and that. Dude, there's nothing like October baseball. That is one on my bucket list, to get there to the stadium and see just those different things happen. And then this year, look, I'm here in Atlanta. I got to experience it on a different level for the first time ever, because you guys are in New Orleans, so we don't have a team back there. And man, the fan base here in Atlanta was just rocking to watch that playoff run. And it was a really cool time.
So they enjoyed the Braves, but they're not showing up for Falcons games, are they?
Yeah, so that was a softball pitch. I know it's baseball, but that was a softball pitch for you guys to really bag on the Falcons. So
it's low hanging fruit right there, man.
You keep mispronouncing Falcons.
My friends here in Atlanta are really suffering right now. They got the championship recently.
Cantlanta? Is that where you live? Cantlanta?
Yeah, They have their dude Freddie that rolled on over to the Dodgers, and now they sent Matt Ryan off. Us being Houdat fans, man, it's been fun banter over the last few years, but man, it's no fun to have a rivalry when the other team isn't very good. So, and honestly, both of us might not be very good in the next few years. So we'll see how that rolls. But look, we're here for baseball, and we are going to jump into our top 4, our Rushmore of baseball franchises.
All right, so here we go, guys. It is time for our Rushmore of MLB franchises, and we're going to start off with our resident expert, Kirk. Kirk, who is your Rosie first of all, before you say your Rosie, let's say this. How are you picking? Because I know that you're such a big fan of baseball. There's so many ways you can go with this. What is your criteria behind picking your top 4 MLB franchises?
Well, okay, so I'm going to tell you right off the bat, my favorite teams in it, my other 2 out of the other 4 are teams that I have followed over the last few years as kind of like a second favorite team, if you will. whenever my team isn't playing. And the last one I think is probably the most iconic franchise out there that isn't on my list. And so when I was looking at them, I originally thought I'm going to talk about possibly what their mascot is, what they're worth, some of the notable players. And I did that. But when it comes down to the brass tacks, it's the teams that I really want to watch or cheer for. And so that's kind of the direction I went. And honestly, there's only about 4 teams in the MLB that I just either can't stand or don't want to watch. Like many sports fans, if that's your sport, like even football, I can remember back in the day where I did not want to see like a Browns-Bengals game, right? Fantasy football changed that for me. I watch every game now, and no matter if they're good or not. And even I did a little fantasy baseball, but for baseball, it don't matter. I'll have whatever game, any game on, and at least in the background. So there's only about 4 teams that I wouldn't pick. So, but without further ado, though, let me jump into my very first franchise that I'm going to put on. And obviously I kind of alluded to it. It's going to be the team that isn't one of my favorites, but it is probably the most iconic or the best franchise, if you will, that's not on my list. And that is the Los Angeles Dodgers. And honestly, I'm not a huge fan of the Dodgers only because for years, they've always been on top. It's kind of like that. If the team is on top and they're not your favorite, you always hate them, right? You're like, gosh, I'm tired of seeing them. But there are a bunch of really good things about the Dodgers. First off, they've got 7 World Series titles, and they've actually won the National League pennant like 25 times. Now, one of those was during COVID, so a lot of people aren't counting it. But yeah, they won 2 years ago. They just made a big signing with Freddie and took him over. So it's a big rivalry here in Atlanta. So a lot of Atlanta friends just really hate the Dodgers. But there's some really awesome things about the Dodgers. I think they probably have the second best uniform in all of Major League Baseball, especially their home whites. That new blue that they're using with the red numbers is just spectacular looking. I was watching it during the playoffs last year, and I was like, dang, these jerseys look phenomenal. And one thing, it might be the type of TV or whatever we see now instead of back in the day, but those uniforms look great. There are some really big notable players that have gone there. Some of my favorites like Mike Piazza and Eric Karros and Sandy Koufax, all these guys that really have been around. But now one of my favorites is Nick Turner. So he's the bearded fellow, you know what I mean? And so I kind of like watching him play. But last but not least, some of the things that are really iconic about this team is the fact that they have Vin Scully.
It's time for Dodger baseball.
And if you know anything about baseball, he is the probably premier announcer that kind of was around for all those years. They get to claim Vin. And if you see any like home run calls from being down there in Chavez Ravine, that you'd see that they are they're pretty unique because he's an older fellow, talks really slow. And what the Dodgers bring as a stadium is probably the most iconic food, the Dodger dog. And so if you've been there, I've been to the Dodgers Stadium once. It was a great game, and it's just a fun time. So without further ado, I think for several reasons, top of the list for a long time, just a great franchise. And they also are the second most expensive team. And that is them running into $3.5 billion. Can you imagine that?
Yeah.
Holy cow. I was shocked at some of these numbers, and it is what it is. So the Dodgers, my number 4, my Rosie, coming in right off the bat, hitting Atlanta in the face. But yeah, that's my Dodgers pick. So number 4, Rosie. All right, Andy. So we're gonna jump to your pick. Who is your Rosie and your criteria? Because I know you're not you're not all about the stats or anything like that, but there are some really things that you looked into how you picked it because you do love baseball. What is your criteria and how you went?
Yeah. So before I tell you my criteria, I just want to tell you, you picked the wrong California team, but it's okay. I'll let you go. I think you guys can figure out.
You wanted me to pick the Padres?
No, also the wrong one. But anyway, we'll talk about that later. Here's my criteria. My criteria for picking an MLB franchise, like I said, it's no surprise I'm not as into baseball as Kirk might be, but I do appreciate it. So when I think baseball, when I just envision in my head baseball, there are teams that just without even having to research any statistic, any history, any uniform, anything, they just come to my mind. When I think baseball, classic, right? Because baseball, out of every major sport or event that you can do, it's that American classic. It's just the idea, the aura of baseball is so iconic. And with that comes some very iconic franchises. So, outside of that, and then a few of my teams, really like two of the four, I have a little bit of personal tie-in to slightly. And that starts with my number 4. My Rosie is the Chicago Cubs.
Cubbies.
And the reason I picked the Cubs is this. So I remember, as an adolescent teen time or whatever, kind of following the whole Sammy Sosa thing. And there's just a really cool entertainment value behind baseball. I remember in 2016 watching the Game 7 where they ended the drought. I mean, look, even as a not huge fan of baseball, you could not be glued to the TV. Like
that might have been one of the best Game 7s ever.
Everybody was pulling for, other than listen, I'm not a baseball guy. Who were they even playing? The
Indians, which were also in a huge drought.
Yeah, but not quite as big of a drought as the Cubs were. So, man, you just couldn't help but pull for it. There's an iconic, Wrigley Field, that whole idea behind all of that. So the Cubs, to me, when I think baseball, is one of those things that just stick out to me as being very iconic and one of the best MLB franchises. Now, Kirk can probably fill in some statistics and things like that off the top of his head, but I just automatically, that's where my brain goes, as one of my teams.
Dude, I love the Cubs. I love the fact that they had the WGNO. That made them worldwide, or nationwide at least. As kids, a lot of folks down in New Orleans were Cubs fans or even White Sox fans because that was the Chicago station, and then Atlanta fans because of TBS, TBN, or TNT, sorry. How about, look, I said Vince Scully, but they have one of the greatest announcers of all time too, right? Harry Carey.
Sure as God made green apples, someday the Chicago Cubs are going to be in the World Series, and maybe sooner than we think.
Yeah, and then, I mean, they have great players. You named Sosa. That run of Sosa and McGuire back
awesome. It was so entertaining, man.
98. I remember I was in basic training when that was happening, and my parents were like saving the newspaper articles. I've still got newspaper articles from that, like whole newspapers of them on the cover. He hit 61. He hit 62. He hit 60. Dude, it was that literally probably saved baseball. Then you got the Bartman thing where they were almost there and the ball hits him and the fan like gets death threats.
Yeah.
The ivy, that's iconic. The ivy around the back. That Chicago played a lot of day games. So there were a lot of times where you could like stay at home from school, and instead of watching the Game Show Network, you could throw on a Cubby game. The Cubs are a great organization. They almost made mine. They're probably about 5 or 6 for me. But man, I love them. But yeah, Cubs, great pick.
Awesome
for your Rosie. Chris, your turn, man. We're gonna jump into you. So you've watched it before. Rosie is number 4 for Roosevelt. Tell us first tell us how'd you pick your guys, and then who is your number 4?
So I picked strictly on childhood nostalgia.
There you go.
I haven't followed baseball really tightly in over a decade, but I've been a fan of catching games live and just being neutral. So when my daughter and I do travel to a stadium, she picks a team and I go with the other team. So yeah, it was really hard not to put Chicago on here for the simple fact that a Salmon alum was part of that team for as long as he was.
Yeah.
Support the friends, But my Rosie is actually probably a surprise to you, and it would be the Yankees.
Nice.
I mean, they're iconic. I've it's been a long time since I've been emotionally invested in a baseball team. And the Yankees, I mean, pretty much every iconic A-Rod, Babe Ruth, like there's the history. You can't talk baseball history without the Yankees. To not have them on my list, whether they're my favorite or not, would be, in my opinion, a disservice to myself, because your team absolutely, anybody's team absolutely had to have a run in with them. You know, they've had so many peaks over the years. You can't not appreciate that. So I'm going to go with the Yankees.
Of course, I'm going to love that pick.
And you're in the jersey, man. Like the simple pinstripe jersey. Like it's everything. It's everything about baseball. It's still got that classic early 1900s look to it. You know.
Yeah, I obviously there. If you've followed me for, you know, I'm going on 44 now. If you followed me for any stretch of time, you know who my George is going to be. It's not a surprise. It's not like I'm giving a spoiler alert. But yeah, I'll talk more about them here shortly. So that's a great pick. Yeah, I'm going to jump into number 3, TJ Jazzy Jeff. And this kind of may be a surprise, may not, but I'm going to go with the Chicago White Sox. And man, there's so many reasons why I picked the White Sox. But number 1, the very first thing is Frank Thomas. Back in the mid to late 90s, he was my favorite player that didn't wear pinstripes. You know, he was my favorite player. I looked him up the other day. Me and another friend were talking, and I said, I know there's this stat out there that is just insanely crazy, right? And the stat was, for 7 straight years, Frank Thomas hit 300, 100 RBIs, 100 walks, 100 something, maybe 100 RBIs, 100 runs, 100 walks, and then over 20 home runs. Only guy ever to do that. And I just really loved him. And then about mid-90s, right? Thomas was there. Michael Jordan tried out for the Chicago White Sox with the Barons. And right about the same time, Bo Jackson gets a career-ending injury from football, and he tries to make a comeback and goes to the White Sox. And in 1993 or 4, I might be off with the date, I went to the new Comiskey Park to watch them play, and got to see Bo Jackson and Frank Thomas. Michael wasn't there. He was still in the minors, I believe. My time frames might be off because I was like 13. But I just love those guys. I loved Robin Ventura and the runs that they made. And they were kind of the lovable losers, because even though Chicago, the Cubs was the team, they both were losing teams. And they didn't even get the love from their own people. Hip hop made their hats cool, kind of like the Yankees, right? Hats got cool. And they have a pinstripe jersey too. I absolutely love the black and white. Cool story. In that home run, in that game that I went and visited the Comiskey Park, Frank Thomas was doing batting practice, and he hit a home run, and it literally was going over my head. And I was like standing there with my glove, and I'm about to catch it. And some jackwagon of a guy steps up, leans over, catches the ball, and runs off with it. And it is the very first time, probably the very first time in my life, that I thought my dad was going to kill somebody. Like, my dad freaked. Like, the whole reason we drove all the way up here was to see Frank Thomas. And here's the home run ball coming my way. And this guy robs me. The guy runs up the stairs. I'll never forget it. But Chicago White Sox, they've got 3 championships. The last one, I think, was in 2005. That was a pretty cool run, and to watch that. But I love them. I cheer for them. They're kind of my secret dark horse team that I'm always kind of pulling for. But the Southsiders, man, got a really cool vibe. So my TJ Jazzy Jeff, is going to end up with being the Chicago White Sox.
Nice. So we got a lot of Chicago on the board so far. So
Chicago, man.
Chicago getting the love today.
You're Abe Froman.
That's right. I'm Abe Froman.
The Sausage King of Chicago.
Yeah, that's me.
Yeah.
Need some Peter Cetera for it, man.
Oh, yeah. Look, Chicago made its way into Music March. Chicago. This might be a running theme. No.
It won't make my movies because I can't.
Chicago deep dish pizza might make something. No.
Maybe. So, all right, Andy, TJ, Jazzy Jeff, you're number 3. Who's your third on the list on the mountain franchises? Go ahead.
Yeah. So here's the thing. Let me just preface it with this. As I said in my criteria, what are some teams you can't say baseball without immediately coming to your mind? And this is certainly one of those teams. I don't really have a lot of personal buy-in to them. However, other than that's just where my mind goes when I think of baseball. Also, you guys know Kirk and I are really good friends. We, obviously doing this show together and everything. And this is one of those times where I'm glad Kirk's a couple states away, because I think he'd want to punch me when I say this one. And I know he knows exactly where I'm going with this. My TJ Jazzy Jeff, Boston Red Sox. I know, yeah, you can boo it all you want. Here's what I think. Again, as I said twice already, my brain just goes there when you think of baseball. The Green Monster is an iconic, part of the ballpark there. And then to me, David Ortiz, Big Papi, I just love that guy. He's Papi. I love hearing him talk, right? If you've ever watched a Saturday Night Live skit where Keenan plays David Ortiz.
Before the big game, all the players got together in the clubhouse and we all have a big lunch. We're going to have mofongo, lechon asado, pastelito con bistec, refresca de merengue, y bandera con papa frita.
It's Keenan. Okay, I'm going to not get off topic, but Keenan is one of the greatest SNL members ever. But I'll digress from there. And then actually even sticking with the Saturday Night Live thing, Jimmy Fallon and like those skits where they're like the Boston fans and stuff, and they're like, pack the car, they're doing all this kind of stuff.
No more jerseys. No more. Never forget.
Just this whole aura around the Red Sox franchise. And like I said, obviously Kirk, it's no surprise who his George is going to be. He just is going to be against this pick, and that's okay. But you cannot say baseball history without talking about the Red Sox. A lot of iconic reasons why the Red Sox are my TJ Jazzy Jeff. And Kirk, I'm going to let you say your piece. What are your thoughts? Where's your mind at right now?
Look, I expect them to be on other people's list. The curse is over. They're a really solid team. Been solid team for the last 2 decades for sure. They've been a solid team even when they weren't winning. But yeah, there are 3 teams in the world that I will never cheer for. I don't care where I move. I don't care if I move to Boston. I don't care if I move to Fenway. There are 3 teams in the world I will never, ever cheer for. And that is the Boston Red Sox and obviously the Atlanta Falcons and Alabama Crimson Tide.
Roll Tide, baby. Roll Tide. All right.
And so I know that's your jam as well. So I am not doing it. So, but there are some great players. But a lot of the guys that I just absolutely hate in sports come from those 3 teams. So, Papi's great. He's probably one of my favorites just because it's hard not to like him. He's lovable. Yeah. But, they're third on the list for championships. I think they're tied with the Cardinals for third most.
They have 9.
And,
based on my research. Yeah.
And then, they had a few these last few years, but, Alex Cora brought that cheating scandal over there. So we'll see if they still continue to count that one. But, hey, Chris, it's your turn, man.
All
TJ
right.
Jazzy Jeff, number 3. Who's your third favorite franchise?
My TJ Jazzy Jeff is another nostalgia based here, And it goes back to the fact that Bionic Bo Jackson was on this team for the majority of his career, and the Kansas City Royals.
Kansas City.
I just could not, like, when I thought about this, it was at the time Bo Jackson was playing, I watched baseball on TV, and he was one of the handful of players I rooted for. I watching him perform. I remember watching the throw from outfield to home plate, and it was the most perfect thing I've ever seen in my life.
How about when he ran up the fence? I think it was the All-Star game, maybe.
When he ran up the wall to catch
Yeah.
the homer. Yeah, dude, he's like way ahead of his time.
People don't understand. Well, I say people. This next generation of kids will just never understand how great of a freaking athlete that man was.
They don't know Bo. They don't know.
I hear a lot of people give Dion, and Dion was phenomenal. Another two-sport athlete, professional two-sport. He was just flashy. Bo Jackson, you could just tell he was.
Remember when he made
he was to baseball.
Cool.
Yes, he was to baseball. He was to baseball during his era what Wilt Chamberlain must have been to basketball during his, because there was nobody doing anything close to what Bo Jackson was capable of.
So Royals is a great pick. I mean, obviously they don't have a ton of championships. This last run that they had, I was all in, man. I was all in Royals. Obviously, I'm a Chiefs fan. And I got a lot of friends who are Chiefs fans as well that I've met over the years. And most of them are, in Kansas City area. And so there was a vibe kind of going on my social media. And I always like to see the underdog win if it's not my team. And that was a great run. It was fun. But what I have always hated about the Royals and Royals, Pittsburgh Pirates, San Diego Padres, some of these teams for years, and obviously the Padres are trying to make a run at it. They have been the minor league affiliate for most of the main teams. They have raised so much young, great talent out of Kansas City and sent them off to win championships otherwhere. Johnny Damon, Carlos Beltran, Hosmer. These guys, it just goes on and on and on. And we talked a little earlier, George Brett might be one of the greatest ball players ever to live. I know he's in the top 100 when that list came out. He's a great Royal. So that's a good pick. It's a surprising pick, but it's not surprising knowing that you picked Bo.
Yeah.
So great pick. So we're halfway there, franchises, and man, this has been fun so far, but I am going to jump into my number 2, my turn to come out with my second favorite or second best, I guess, franchise in my opinion. And this might actually be more of a shocker than any of them. And it's not because I moved here, but I'm going to take the Atlanta Braves. 1995. 1995.
That was a killer run.
We had just got done with having a strike season a year or two prior, which I'm sad for because the Montreal Expos were busting their tail during that strike season. And they come back and the Braves go on this run of 2-3 years of just being legit. And I will never forget, one of the greatest plays I've ever seen in my life was Sid Bream sliding into home to go to the World Series and stuff. And so they ended up winning the World Series in 95. I was a kid. I had one of those yellow wiffle ball bats. And I was in my living room, and my living room back then was a garage that was kind of like modified to be a room. So the ceiling was low. And when he slid in, I jumped up like that and I put the wiffle ball bat right through the roof. Man, I got in trouble for that. But then the next year they ran into the buzzsaw of the Yankees and didn't win. But man, some players on that team, they're some of my favorite players of all time. They have probably the best pitching staff ever. three-man rotation: Tom Glavine, Greg Maddux, John Smoltz. They even had Avery, and they picked up a few guys here and there. The Dave Justices of the world, Furcal, and all those guys back then. And then you move into the Chipper Jones era, and now they have what is arguably the home run king when you talk about Bonds and the things that surrounds him. But Hank Aaron, Dale Murphy was one of those guys that was just loved. But this last run, me being here and watching some of my friends and kind of cheering it on, and some new people I've met, they were always a team that I didn't hate them, because I have a lot of friends that love them even back home. I mentioned it in the Chicago. TNT and TBS used to play them all the time. So there are a lot of Braves fans in the New Orleans area. So, man, I kind of love them from a distance, but they're kind of like the National League team I'll cheer for. If they're on the National League, I'll cheer for them. But if you run into the Yankees, though. And I went to the Yankees Braves last year, both games. Yankees won them both, and it was a great time. But then as soon as that was done, I'm cheering for the Braves again. So it was a great run last year. I'm happy for the city and everything. Sad to see Freddie go, but I understand it, man. I understand it. It's a business. It's how it goes, man. And it is what it is. So I'm going to go number 2, my link, the Atlanta Braves, the Bravos, man. Tomahawk chop, man. They can't get rid of it. So, yeah, let's jump in. Andy, man. Who's your link, man? Who's number 2?
All right, number 2. My number 2. Here it is. This is our first Rushmore. And it's going to be a triple Crushmore. There's no doubt about it. My number 2 is the New York Yankees.
Let's go.
Listen, every reason that you, Chris, mentioned earlier, and that Kirk, I know you're going to mention later. There's not a team there. Well, let me say this. There's certain teams within sports, not just baseball, but in sports, that just have an aura about them. There's just, and like you said, haven't won since 2009. And there's other teams that haven't won since 2009, right? Like, like you're talking 2009. There's 1909. No, but there's just auras to these teams, right? And you talk about, and they don't even have to be the most successful as of late. You talk about like the Dallas Cowboys, right? There's just this aura around them, and they can be, and I'm not a Cowboys fan at all. And but there's this aura about them, right? You talk about the Lakers, right? There's this aura about them, and they're a little bit more successful as of late. But the New York Yankees absolutely have the brightest aura around them. And it goes without being said, right? 27 titles, right? All of the countless iconic athletes who have put the pinstripes on, who have been a part of that franchise. Just the city of New York, like just everything. It's perfect. They've got every ingredient that you need to be the best MLB franchise or sports franchise of all time. So, you talk about the guys like, Derek Jeter is just one of those guys that when you think of baseball, you cannot, just like you said, Chris, if you're telling the story of baseball, you're doing a disservice and you're being disrespectful if the Yankees, even if you hate the Yankees, right? Even if you just cannot stand it, just like the Tom Brady's, like, look, when history gets written of NFL, Tom Brady's going to be the greatest player of all time, and we don't have to have the debate. He's going to go down as that. Just get over it, right? Like, that's what we have to do. Can we just appreciate it for what it is? You don't have to be a big fan, but just acknowledge the fact that just like Brady is for the NFL, the Yankees for MLB, for the long, illustrious history of the MLB, of baseball in general, right? Just how iconic, the jerseys, right? The pinstripes in general, the logo. Listen, you can go to any gas station in America and they're selling some bootleg New York Yankees hat, right?
I gave one at the homeless truck the other day, and it was like the Louis Vuitton, and had like all these things here, and it looked like somebody made it in their garage. I was like, look at this. Oh, it's a Yankees hat. No, that's not a real one. Here, you can take that one.
Yeah, so it's just, listen, it's one of those logos too that you could probably show to somebody. Like, so you could show it to like a teenager now, or maybe even younger, and they could probably point it out. It's like the Walmart logo. It's like Target. It's like it's just the whole franchise. Yeah, there's no, I can't say much more about it. And obviously Kirk is going to get into some specifics later about it, but the New York Yankees, my number 2, my
Nice.
on my Rushmore.
So look, you redeem yourself. You at least put the Yankees at 2 and the Red Sox at 3. Right?
I had to do it for you, and I did that strategically. We have to continue the Rushmore show. The people want it. Yeah, so that
all
is
right. Chris, man,
right.
Who's number 2? Your link, man, Lincoln.
All right. This, outside of the Bash Brothers, is absolutely my favorite player to ever touch a baseball. And when I got introduced to him, he had moved on from the Mets to the Rangers. And Nolan Ryan, his pitching at the time, man, he was pitching into his 40s at a phenomenal level, still holds records that could possibly never be touched.
Spoiler alert, he's probably going to be on next week's podcast.
Nice. The way they pitch count pitchers these days, the records he set are almost impossible to touch. It would take a major overhaul and I know I'm going on a tangent about a player, but that's how I pick these teams. I watched the Rangers play in what was it, 87 to like the early 90s when he played for them. The Texas Rangers are my number 2. They for sure just have something about them. Other than Nolan Ryan, it was, the proximity to home. They were, a car drive away and you could go see a game. So even though we didn't have a home team, they were the equivalent to the Braves for us. You could drive in either direction and go check out your team when they were coming as close to the area as they almost ever did when they played the 2-game series against the Dodgers in New Orleans.
Yep. So they did that twice. They did that twice. I saw the Yankees do that, and I think the Yankees played the Red Sox actually. And
that was the year before the Dodgers
and then the Dodgers in Oakland played the next year. That was a part of that whole Busch Challenge thing, which, dude, I missed that.
Man. Yeah. So yeah, the Rangers. There's not again historically. I mean, the logo's boring. Nothing phenomenal about the uniforms, but Nolan Ryan.
One of my favorite things about the Rangers are Ivan Rodriguez and Juan Gonzalez. Those 2 guys played on the Rangers. A-Rod played there a little bit. They've had some good teams. They had that run with Josh Hamilton where they went to the World Series. I think they lost to the Cardinals. That was the David Freese down the line comeback win, if I remember correctly. But the Rangers are great. Rangers are my I've seen them the second most. I've seen the Yankees the most, obviously, but I've seen them the second most because my sister lives in Dallas. And I actually got to go and see Nolan pitch. And that is a highlight of my life, man. He is by far one of the top players, not just players, but pitchers ever. 7 no-hitters. That's crazy.
And to be fair, he probably got out of the game safely because there's no way he wasn't putting a cortisone shot in that elbow.
Yeah. That's a good pick. That is a great pick. It's a surprise. When you were kind of leading up to it, I was like, okay, who's he going with? He's going with the Cardinals. He's going with the Giants. He's going with I was trying to think of even the Mets. I was like, who are these other
Giants? The Giants were hard to eliminate off of this list, man. Especially since Elena and I saw the Giants and the Athletics play just last summer. Their stadium, that atmosphere, ultimately.
I will say this: throwing honorable mentions out, Giants are probably there. Their stadium is wonderful, and I went to the old Candlestick, and that was cool. But the whole experience where the ball goes in the water for the Bay and Barry Bonds, that whole run that he did, dude, that place was electric. And then I think it was the All-Star game when Ichiro hit that ball in the corner and got the in the park home run. Dude, there's so many really cool things that happen in San Francisco. Buster Posey, they're a really awesome franchise. They're just not one of my favorite teams. And so that's why I eliminated them. So anyways, I'm going to jump into the George. Yeah, my George is obviously the evil empire, man, the New York Yankees. The Bronx Bombers, can go on and on. You mentioned it. The aura is there. And let me just go on and say this, because I'm always asked. Everybody always says, dude, why are you a Yankees fan? Are you a bandwagon guy? I was a bandwagon guy at like 2 years old. Okay. Like 2. When I was a kid, my dad used to tell me stories, and I don't even know how true this is, but this is kind of the story he used to tell me, was that when he was younger, my dad dropped out in 8th grade of school. He didn't finish high school, worked his tail off, and was a great father and working guy. But he went and worked for the family and brought home the bread and helped my grandmother out. And, they were the type of family that was hiding from the tax collectors. But one thing he used to tell me is they had a little radio. And because baseball was 162 games, it played 3/4 of the time. And because the Yankees were so good in the 50s and 60s, they were always on the radio. And so he fell in love with the idea of the Mickey Mantles and the Joe DiMaggios and the Lou Gehrig's. And if you guys know me, right, I'm one of 11 kids, but really one of 5 natural kids, and I'm the only boy, and I'm the last one. And I had 6 stepsisters. And when I came and blessed my parents as the first boy, my dad was so excited that he dressed me in Yankees gear, and he wanted me to switch hit like Mantle and put my pinky off the edge before I even got to T-ball. My dad was teaching me and telling me about the Yankees, because you guys know it, in New Orleans, we don't have a team. And that's what he listened to. And that's what all my family are Yankees fans, every one of them, except for my sister, Tracy. And if you watch this, we know you love the Red Sox, and it's disgusting. But we're just a Yankees family, and love it or hate it, it's where it was. And I also say this, my favorite Yankee player of all time, shockingly, is not the Jeters or the Mantles of the world, as I do love those. They're on my list. But it's Don Mattingly. And Mattingly never won a championship, because when I started watching him, he was the best player on that team. And the year he left, I think, was 94, 95. They ended up winning it at 96. That sucks. Ken Griffey sliding in the home on the play-in game in 1995 knocked Mattingly out, and he retired after that. I know you're going to name one of my favorite parks that I've been to, Andy, is and as you're coming up, George. But I went to a game out there, and Don Mattingly hit his hit a home run to win the game while I was there. I mean, I just love the Yankees. 27 titles. They're worth $6 billion. They had the boss. They'll bring in anybody. It does change my perspective when it comes to picking up players and how you pay players. This is a big deal. For years, it was always the Yankees buy championships. Now everybody buys championships. Everybody. And if you're not buying championships, really, you're not being competitive unless you're the Tampa Bay Rays, right? That's about the only team that really can roll in there and do it without it. In the game of baseball, with no cap, right? No cap. The best thing about it is the owner doesn't have to bring home all the bread. I said this team's worth $6 billion. They make about $600 million a year. Their salary they pay out is $200 million. So they make about $800 million plus all the jersey sales and everything. Why do I want Hal Steinbrenner to take home the money because he's the owner and not pay the next free agent so we can go get another championship or whatever? And I think your team should do it too. But yeah, it's been a great run to watch them. I saw 6 championships. I've seen 6. Jeter was king of those. And it's been amazing. So we're chasing 28. It's been a while. Hopefully they sign Judge. Got my Judge jersey on. But yeah, number 1 franchise by far. Probably they have the most championships in any sport, period. It's got to be the Yankees. Got to be them. Pinstripes, all the things that you guys named. One of the best parts, though, I'll tell you this: they have the most Hall of Famers in the hall, but they have a monument park at Yankee Stadium. And obviously the new Yankee Stadium is not like the old one, but if you go down there and you walk through that, you just get the chills of the great Bambino and DiMaggio and Gehrig and Yogi Berra and Thurman Munson and all these guys, Reggie Jackson, all those guys that played for years and were icons of the sport, especially if you love baseball. I totally get your hate, but that's okay. And it is what it is. So number one, obviously for me, the George Steinbrenner, right? The George of franchises will be the Yankees.
Nice.
So Andy, who is your George of franchises?
Yeah, it's not a surprise with the hat that I'm wearing here. And I will fully admit that when I talk about my criteria of being teams that people think of when they think baseball, this might be on some people's list, but it's certainly not in the same realm as the Yankees, Red Sox, Cubs, as I mentioned before. But my George is totally just a personal feel, is the Angels. I'm a big Angels fan, Anaheim, California, Los Angeles of Anaheim, whatever you want to call them. But that franchise, that is my George, my number one. And it goes back to this. My dad grew up Southern Cal, big Angels fan growing up, sneaking into games and stuff back in the day. And he would always just tell us stories of that. It's actually the one professional game that I've been to. So I've been to that stadium before, and I'll still remember the Twins blew them out like 12-2, but I don't even care, man. Just the whole, like the waterfall in the park, the big A with the halo, and it's a really great park. All of my previous picks have had multiple titles. The Angels have one, but I'm going back to 2002, right? That was their World Series year. They had not so long. They've kind of switched over to that red look. I have a throwback one on, which, side note, a lot of people online hate this look that they rocked or whatever. I love it, but maybe it's because when I was getting into them, this is what they were wearing. But anyway, 2002, I just remember staying up with my dad, following the Angels. I have an aunt who worked at different sporting events. So we actually have a signed basketball from the Clippers back in the day. And there's not a single player that played for the Clippers that anyone would know. This was Clippers, right? So we have a basketball still at my parents' house. But she would send us a lot of Angels swag, right? So we had the Rally Monkeys, we had the Thunder Sticks, we had just all kinds of great stuff from that. But staying up, watching every game with my dad, following it on Sports Center the next morning.
This is Sports Center.
Waking up early with my dad in the morning, getting the highlights of the game again. It was one of those just moments in my life that I'll never forget. It's really kind of the beginning of me following baseball, caring about baseball. And again, as I mentioned before, and I'm not as avid of a fan of baseball. I definitely follow football a little bit more when we talk about that, but there's still just this aura, like I said, with the Yankees, that you just surrounds baseball. It's that American classic. It's America's pastime, right? And the Angels are really what kind of sparked that interest for me. So my George, without a doubt, easy pick for me. And again, it goes to show you that your Rushmores are your personal Rushmore. It's not what any critic will say. In fact, I actually Googled just to make sure, just to give me a little bit of context. I Googled best MLB franchises of all time. And man, I kept scrolling. I did not find the Angels anywhere on there. There were teams that have been long gone since 1946 or whatever that made the list before the Angels did. But you talk about now, even right with Ohtani, you've got Trout. You had Pujols, right, for a good bit of time there. He went to the other team in Cali that we just anyway, whatever. But so the Angels, the Halos, my number one, my George on my Rushmore of MLB franchises.
Dude, that's a great pick. That run in 02 was awesome. It was awesome.
And they beat Barry Bonds, right? Like, so they, it was, you're not supposed to win that, right? You're not supposed to win.
Was phenomenal to watch in the outfield.
Erstad, Eckstein, you had Benjamin Luna, it was just, man, it was great. Great.
All right, man. Well, let's close this thing down. Best franchises ever. I think Chris has alluded to it a couple times who his team's going to be. But Chris, man, who is your George of baseball?
My George. So this is going to be no surprise to you guys. Oakland Athletics, man. I grew up a Bash Brothers fan. Jose Canseco and Mark McGwire knocking it out the park. Ricky Henderson, the greatest base stealer possibly to ever play the game.
By far.
It's an art you don't even see anymore. Like, everything is knock it out the park nowadays. Not that baseball doesn't still have its strategy. It's just moved away from that.
All about launch angle instead of base hits.
That's it, man. He was so fast, man. He made the ball speed look normal as fast as he could move. Because of his skills, they had Willie Mays Hayes in Major League modeled after him.
Yeah.
He and just like Bo Jackson did video games, he inspired that fictionally amazing speed character in the movies on the silver screen. And La Russa was the coach at the time.
That was a great run, man.
Man, dude.
Early 90s.
At that time, like, possibly the only bigger icons in my world were maybe like Hulk Hogan, Randy Savage, Ultimate Warrior. Then it was the Bash Brothers.
Yeah, man, it's been a great run, man. 4 franchises, our top 4 franchises. Few surprises.
And the only Crushmore was a triple Crushmore for the Yankees.
New York Yankees.
What does that say? What does that say?
Gosh, a triple Crushmore. And that's okay. And so we listed several teams. All right, Rushmore Show. We are coming to the end of our first episode in Around the Horn April. Last month, we gave you guys Music March, and we ended with who is our super band, our George of bands. We thought it'd be a great idea to give you who would be our super lineup. If we could pick the guys who are our favorite and put them in a lineup, and which team would win between me and Andy's. And hopefully you guys play along. Chris is going to play along with today. And so today, because it is all about your best, we're going to talk about who is your George of infielders. But you know how we do it, man. So it's going to be George Brett, man. So who's your George Brett of infielders? And it's going to be real easy. So just infield today, we're going first base, second base, third base, shortstop, and catcher. To catch the rest of our team, you got to stay and watch the next 4 episodes, and we're going to announce the full team at the end. So off the top, Andy, who is your George Brett of infielders?
All right, here we go. So
lineup, baby.
My ultimate goal is just to beat Kirk's team. If I can, out of mine, in a hypothetical, never going to happen kind of world, can my team beat Kirk's team? I think my band did pretty well. Got the headlining spot, right? But let's see. Maybe you can even it out. We'll see. You know a lot more about baseball. But here we go. First base, starting in first base, ex-Angel. I tried to originally just do all Angels at every position, but then I was like, man, let me not do that. I want to win.
You wouldn't win then. You wouldn't win.
So I want to win. So my number 1 though is an ex-Angel, Albert Pujols. Okay, so my number 1, first base, Albert Pujols. Second base, we're gonna go way classic. We're gonna go number 42, right? We're gonna go Jackie Robinson at second base for us. Shortstop, I'm gonna take Kirk's shortstop, or I don't know if he's gonna pick him or not, but I'm going for Jeter at shortstop for me.
Capitone.
I'm going for Jeter. Third base, Mike Schmidt. Schmidt. I love the last name Schmidt. It's just a fun one to say. He had a cool mustache and everything too. Anyway, so Mike Schmidt, third base. And then my center. Oh my gosh, I'm talking about football. My catcher, I just have C written down here. So I'm thinking My catcher is one of my favorite players of all time. Mike Piazza is my catcher in my infield. So again, just to wrap that up, I got Pujols, Jackie Robinson, Derek Jeter, Mike Schmidt, Mike Piazza is my infield for my super team. What you think of that one?
Dude, that's a great team. Great team. I'm looking at my roster, and your team could stay up with my team because we've got several Crushmores on this. Nice.
All right, so Kirk.
All right, so I'm gonna give you my list. Now, first off, I kind of, this one right here is a caveat. It's my favorite player of all time. First base has to be Donnie Baseball, Don Mattingly. He's number one. And I'm going him at first base. Second base. FYI, most of these guys are going to be my time frame. So I didn't pick any of the superstars from the 60s or 50s, except for one, and that will come in a later time. So anyways, second base, Robbie Alomar, Roberto Alomar. Love him. Great player. Shortstop, Crushmore, Derek Jeter.
I knew it would happen.
Third base, Crushmore, Mike Schmidt.
All right.
And catcher, it was almost a Crushmore. Almost a Crushmore. I'm going to go with Pudge Ivan Rodriguez. So that's going to be my infield of George Brett. Chris, man, tell us, who do you got in your infield?
I don't know what the heck I was thinking when I was just picking my Rushmore. I didn't pay attention to positions, so because he's more recent, he's at the bottom of my list. A-Rod,
good pick. He was almost made mine. So you playing him at shortstop or third? You got options right there. Options.
All right, and then Mattingly would have been my first baseman if I was picking one.
Rushmore.
Cal Ripken Jr. Longevity. You can't mess with him. Wade Boggs would have been my George.
Some more shortstops and third baseman. You're loaded on the left side.
And to make it a triple Crushmore, Mike Schmidt.
Yeah.
Mike Schmidt. Dude, he nailed out the whole left side. You got no second baseman, so Cal's got to move over.
I got to
move over.
We're going to play defense. We don't need a first baseman.
A-Rod's catching. Cal's playing second.
Put Knuckles at first base.
Love it. Knuckles, man. Love it. Hey, man. So look, this has been Who's Your George Brett Infielders. We're going to name out our outfielders next week and so on and so forth. We're going to go through our pitching staff week 3, and then we're going to close it up with some other parts of the fun team to give you our best baseball lineup possible. And so stick with us and see what we're doing. Hey guys, it's been a real fun time going over the Rushmore of franchises. We got a great power-packed month planned for you. Stay along with us. Obviously, if you like the content, hit the thumbs up. If you love it, hook us up with a subscribe. We love you guys being a part of the Rushmore community. And as we always do, this is the Rushmore Show, where it's all about your top 4 and nothing more.
Peace.